He was the voice of a generation. But in his final days, Kurt Cobain was slipping away. Behind closed doors, there was more than just depression and addiction. There was a hidden battle and a chilling detail buried in his journals that changes everything. The truth? It's not the version most people know. And it paints his final days in a completely different light. It's better to burn out than to fade away. That's how it ended. A note soaked in sorrow, left beside a shotgun in a quiet Seattle greenhouse. April 5th, 1994. The day music lost its wounded prince. Chapter 1. The Haunting. Hook. Kurt Cobain wasn't just a rock star, he was a mirror. A vessel for the angst, confusion, and quiet rage that every misfit kid of the 90s couldn't put into words. When he screamed, they screamed. When he suffered, they felt it. He didn't just sing their pain, he became it. But behind the flannel shirts, the snarling guitars, and the eyeliner-smudged eyes, something was breaking. Fame wasn't fuel for Kurt, it was poison. At the height of Nirvana's success, while Smells Like Teen Spirit was setting radio stations on fire and their faces were plastered on every magazine rack in the world, Kurt was quietly slipping away. He hated interviews, hated paparazzi, hated being turned into a symbol. He once said, "I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not." And maybe that's what this story is really about. A man at war with the machine that crowned him. A world that begged him to scream louder, bleed harder, and give more, until he had nothing left. But this isn't just another rock tragedy, because what happened in Kurt Cobain's final days wasn't random. There were signs, notes, secrets, and one final moment that still doesn't sit right, even now, decades later. The official report said it was suicide. But those who knew him, and those who have studied the case, aren't so sure. The heroin levels, the missing prints, the letter with two different handwritings. What was Kurt trying to say? And more importantly, who was listening? This is not a conspiracy story. It's a revelation of how a voice that defined a generation was silenced, and the dark truth that may have died with it. So before we get to the end, let's go back to where it all began. A sleepy logging town, a broken home, and a boy who just wanted someone to understand him. Because before he became a legend, Kurt Cobain was just a lost kid, with a sketchbook full of monsters and a second-hand guitar. And it's there, in the pain of his early years, that the real story begins. Chapter 2. A Broken Childhood. A Beautiful Escape. Kurt Donald Cobain was born on February 20th, 1967 in Aberdeen, Washington, a gray, rain-soaked logging town where dreams didn't grow, they got drowned. His parents, Wendy and Don, were working class and proud, but their love didn't last. When Kurt was just 9 years old, they divorced, and everything changed. He later called it the most traumatic event of his life. He bounced between homes, feeling like luggage in a custody battle no one wanted to win. The once smiling kid with the Beatles haircut started drawing dark, twisted cartoons. He became withdrawn, angry, volatile. Teachers said he was gifted, but unfocused. Psychologists said he needed help, but no one listened. Kurt's world was chaos. His father tried to enforce discipline, sports, structure, small-town normalcy, but Kurt rejected it all. He wasn't just different, he was suffocating. He started skipping class, getting high, and filling notebooks with poetry and song fragments that read like cries from a basement window. He once wrote, "I hate myself and I want to die." At the time, people thought it was just performance. Later, they realized it wasn't. He slept on friends' couches, sometimes under bridges. Aberdeen had no stage for someone like Kurt. No space for sensitivity, creativity, or rebellion. But then he discovered punk. Not just the music, the spirit. The rawness of Black Flag, the sarcasm of the Melvins, the freedom of being broken on purpose. Here was a culture that didn't care about being clean or polite. It cared about being real. That's when Kurt found his lifeline. A cheap guitar, an old 4-track recorder, and a voice he didn't know he had, until it came roaring out of him like fire through cracked drywall. And for the first time, Kurt wasn't just surviving. He was building something loud, ugly, honest, beautiful. He started a band with his high school friend Chris Novoselic, rehearsing in basements and abandoned buildings. They weren't great, not yet, but they were real. And that was all Kurt ever wanted. Not perfection, not pop stardom, just a sound that matched what he felt inside. He didn't know it yet, but that raw, gut-level sound would soon explode across the world. And when it did, Kurt wouldn't be ready for what came with it: the fame, the pressure, the betrayal. But first, Nirvana had to be born. Chapter 3: The Rise of Nirvana. In 1987, Kurt Cobain and Chris Novoselic officially formed a band. They went through names like Skid Row and Fecal Matter before settling on one that felt ironic and perfect: Nirvana. They weren't trying to change the world. They just wanted to be loud, raw, and heard. Their early shows were chaotic: broken strings, blown amps, bloodied fingers. But in the underground scenes of Seattle and Olympia, people started noticing. Kurt wasn't just another grunge frontman. He had something else. This volatile mix of melody and rage, like the Beatles dropped acid and woke up screaming in a garage. In 1989, Nirvana released their first album, Bleach, through Sub Pop Records. It cost just $606.17 to record. The sound was thick, sludgy, aggressive. But even then, Kurt's gift for hooks peeked through the noise. They toured constantly, slept in vans, ate gas station food, and with every mile, the fan base grew. Slowly, steadily, rapidly. But Kurt was already growing restless. He wanted more than the Seattle scene could offer. He was dreaming of songs that could shake arenas without selling out his soul. In 1990, drummer Chad Channing was replaced by Dave Grohl, a powerhouse with finesse, and everything changed. The chemistry was instant. The sound clicked. They signed with DGC Records, a major label under Geffen. Some in the punk community cried betrayal. Kurt didn't care. In 1991, they recorded Nevermind. Nobody, not even the label, expected much. But when Smells Like Teen Spirit hit MTV, everything detonated. Suddenly, Nirvana wasn't just a band. They were a revolution. Grunge blew pop off the charts. Hair metal died overnight. And a quiet, angry kid from Aberdeen became the reluctant spokesman of a generation. But Kurt hated the title. He felt misunderstood, overexposed, and used. In interviews, he looked uncomfortable, twitchy. He saw his songs being misinterpreted, commodified. He once told a journalist, "They don't hear me, they just wear me." The more famous Nirvana became, the more Kurt wanted to disappear. Fame brought money, awards, and sold-out tours. But it also brought leeches, lies, and addiction. And behind the scenes, Kurt's world was starting to crack, one hit single at a time. Chapter 4: The Chaos. Behind the curtain. To the world, Kurt Cobain was the face of a cultural revolution. But behind the eyeliner, the snarls, and the stage dives, he was unraveling. The fame was a pressure cooker, and Kurt was trapped inside. He'd walk off stage and cry in hotel bathrooms. He hated the cameras, the tabloids, the industry parties. He couldn't escape the feeling that everything around him was fake except the music. But even that was starting to slip. Kurt lived in near constant physical pain. He suffered from chronic, undiagnosed stomach problems that left him doubled over for days. Doctors couldn't help, so he found his own cure, heroin. It started slow, just enough to numb the fire in his gut. But soon, the line between pain relief and addiction blurred. Friends said he was different, vacant, moody, sometimes unreachable. In 1992, he married Courtney Love, frontwoman of the band Hole, and every bit as fiery and volatile as Kurt. Their relationship was a lightning storm, chaotic, passionate, unpredictable. They fed off each other's highs and drowned in each other's lows. That same year, their daughter Frances Bean was born, and so was a media frenzy. Courtney admitted to using heroin while pregnant in a Vanity Fair interview, prompting an investigation by Child Protective Services. Kurt and Courtney nearly lost custody of their newborn. It devastated them and drove Kurt deeper into isolation. The press tore them apart, junkie rock stars unfit to parent. That's what the headlines screamed. But no one asked how they were actually doing. Kurt became more erratic. Recording sessions were tense. He missed interviews, canceled shows. Even within Nirvana, things got strained. He clashed with Dave and Chris over creative direction, over set lists, over business decisions. He didn't want to tour. He didn't want to smile. He just wanted to feel like himself again, but he couldn't remember who that was. And yet, every night, he got on stage, screamed until his voice cracked, played until his fingers bled, gave everything, even when he had nothing left to give. And then came the final months. A suicide attempt, a rehab escape, a disappearance, and a moment that would leave more questions than answers. Because in Chapter 5, we enter the final spiral. Chapter 5, The Downward Spiral. By early 1994, Kurt Cobain was standing on a cliff edge. Emotionally, physically, spiritually. He had money. He had a family. He had millions of fans. But none of it was enough to keep him tethered to this world. In March, Nirvana arrived in Rome for a European tour. The band was tense. Kurt was distant. Then one morning, Courtney found him unconscious in their hotel room, an overdose of Rohypnol and champagne. The media called it an accident. Courtney later said it was his first suicide attempt. Kurt recovered, but something had shifted. His journals grew darker. He withdrew even further from the people around him. Friends and family organized an intervention at his home in Seattle. Dave Grohl was there. So was Chris. So was Courtney. They begged him to go to rehab. Kurt lashed out, then broke down. Eventually, he agreed. He checked into Exodus Recovery Center in Los Angeles. For a moment, there was hope. He talked to his daughter Frances on the phone, told staff he was feeling better. He even played with other patients, joking around, talking about the future. Then one night, he climbed the fence and vanished. No one knew where he went. Not his friends, not his wife, not his bandmates. He was just gone. For nearly a week, Kurt Cobain wandered in the shadows. There were reported sightings in Seattle, in San Francisco. He bought a shotgun from a local store, allegedly for protection. Meanwhile, Courtney was in full panic. She hired private investigators, filed a missing persons report under the name Wendy O'Connor, his mother, to avoid press attention. But it was already too late. Kurt returned to Seattle, and on April 5, 1994, in a greenhouse above his garage, he took his own life. At least, that's what the official story said. His body wasn't discovered until 3 days later by an electrician sent to install security lighting. A shotgun lay across his chest. A suicide note sat nearby, addressed to Boda, Kurt's imaginary childhood friend. The last lines of that note quoted Neil Young, "It's better to burn out than to fade away." But even in death, something didn't sit right. Because when investigators looked closer at the scene, the autopsy, the note, the story started to unravel. Chapter 6 isn't about theories. It's about facts that still haunt the case to this day. Chapter 6. The Death and the mystery. The official report said suicide, but for many the facts surrounding Kurt Cobain's death have never quite added up. Let's start with the heroin. The toxicology report showed that Kurt had injected himself with 3 times the lethal dose of heroin. Experts argue that with that much heroin in his system, he would have been incapacitated in seconds, unable to lift a shotgun, let alone fire it. So the question lingers. How did he pull the trigger? Then there's the suicide note. Most of it reads like a retirement letter, not a farewell. Kurt writes about leaving music, about losing joy in performing. It's only the final few lines that explicitly mention death. And here's where it gets strange. The handwriting in those last lines looks different. Forensic analysts, journalists, and private investigators, including Tom Grant, hired by Courtney herself, have pointed to this as a major red flag. Grant believes the final lines may have been forged, added later to reshape the note into a suicide letter. And what about the fingerprints? The shotgun found beside Kurt had no usable prints, not even his own. Neither did the pen used to write the note. No prints on the shells, no blood spatter analysis, no gunshot residue tests on his hands. The case was closed in less than a day. Photographs of the scene were never publicly released until 2014, 20 years later. And even then, key images remain sealed. Investigators have refused to reopen the case despite dozens of formal requests. Then there's the missing credit card. After his disappearance from rehab, Kurt's credit card was reportedly used several times. By who? We still don't know. The card was never recovered. All of this has fed the fire of doubt, a fire that never truly went out. Tom Grant retired cops, handwriting experts, and fans around the world continue to ask the same question. Did Kurt Cobain really take his own life? Or did someone make it look that way? There's no smoking gun, no damning tape, just contradictions, gaps, and silence, the kind that echoes louder with time. But this story isn't just about how Kurt died. It's about what he left behind. Because we uncover the secret fear that haunted him until the very end, and the legacy that still haunts us now. Chapter 7. The secret he took with him. Kurt Cobain was afraid of death, but even more than that, he was afraid of becoming a lie. From the beginning, he raged against it. The packaging, the labels, the media machine that turned rebellion into marketing. He saw it happening in real time. Grunge was being sold back to teenagers by the very corporations Nirvana wanted to destroy. He hated being called the voice of a generation. He didn't want to be anyone's savior. He just wanted to write songs and disappear into the distortion. But the more Nirvana succeeded, the more trapped he became. He once said, "I'm too sensitive. I need to be slightly numb just to survive." The secret he took with him? Maybe it wasn't a conspiracy. Maybe it wasn't a cover-up. Maybe the dark truth was internal, that Kurt Cobain knew he could never survive fame. He feared what it was doing to his soul, the commodification of his pain, the distortion of his message, the way people wore his image without understanding the person inside it. His journals are filled with tortured questions. Am I a sellout? Do they care about the music or the myth? What happens when they stop listening? Some believe his death wasn't just an escape from life, but a final statement, a protest against the machine that built him, sold him, and never really saw him. And yet, ironically, in death, Kurt became even bigger than in life. He joined the infamous 27 Club alongside Hendrix, Joplin, and Morrison. His face appeared on t-shirts, posters, murals, album reissues, books were written, movies pitched, conspiracies aired. The thing he feared most, becoming a symbol, was now out of his control. But not everything was lost. His music, still raw, still urgent, still speaking to kids who feel like outsiders, like they're carrying too much pain in a world that doesn't care. Never mind, In Utero, MTV Unplugged. Those aren't just records, they're diaries set to distortion. They're reminders that beauty and pain often live in the same song. Kurt once wrote, "Thank you for the tragedy. I need it for my art." He didn't want to be a rock god. He wanted to be understood. And maybe that's the real legacy he left behind. That even in the noise, even in the chaos, even in the silence of death, Kurt Cobain still speaks. He burned out. He broke down. But he never sold out. What's your favorite Nirvana lyric? And what does it mean to you? Drop it in the comments. And if Kurt's story shook you, wait until you see how Freddie Mercury's last performance broke everyone's heart. Tap here, but be warned, you'll never see him the same way again.